Kench is banned from the LEC.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. We talked about the Karma. That is going to be the first lock-in for Schalke. Of course, this champion can be flexed between mid lane and support. So Schalke have a little bit of room depending on where they want to go with this champion. But this does, of course, leave the Graves open. It also leaves the Aphelios open. And with Kalista and Varus taken off the board, that Ezreal and Aphelios suddenly rise in priority.
And there's the Aphelios. I was wondering if Crownshot would go to what won him the game yesterday, that Ezreal, but instead he says the Aphelios is the marksman I want down towards that bottom lane. And a safe jungler that works well into things like the Graves is the Trundle.
So we didn't see any Trundle yesterday. We saw a couple of Lee Sins, as you mentioned, the Graves. We even saw a couple of set jungles, which caught me by surprise. But speaking to pros, many consider Graves and Trundle to be the go-to junglers that you can safely blind pick. And I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Graves come out from Schalke. We did see them play it yesterday. But these are the two kind of strong go-to. And I think it also makes a lot of sense in the context of we're seeing a lot more tanks in the top side of the map. So it's a great way of removing that front line, making it easier for champions like Aphelios to just melt that down and then play those front to back a lot more quickly.
Yeah, when the enemy tank isn't that tanky, it doesn't provide that much of a front line. Subjugate can do a lot of work. There is the Ezreal for Innaxe in the bottom lane. We'll see if that Karma is going to stick in support. But Kindred is a jungler I have seen on the edges of pickable, and it is going to get locked in for Lurox.
All right, so first rotation is done, but I want to talk a little bit more about this Kindred. I was actually talking to Kobe over in North America, and he was the one telling me about, you got to think about this Kindred pick, because I think it's really strong into things like the Trundle, and it's often a counter pick. It's not a super popular pick here in Europe, but we do have a couple of Kindred players, and I know that Lurox is one of them. So he's feeling pretty comfortable because of the amount of mobility that Kindred does have. She can dash, she can dance around, and her ultimate can be very effective in later game team fights, and she's going to scale pretty well as well. So I like the pick into the Trundle, and we're going to see how Schalke can utilize it as we move into the second phase of bans.
All about being able to get those marks on the Kindred, getting yourself that extra range and attack speed. Nautilus is locked in for SK. That's going to round out their bottom lane. The expectation is that they'll be playing into Ezreal Karma. And then we're starting to see a top lane ban, a mid lane ban, some of just the stronger picks. Ornn getting removed from the pool by SK as well. And we'll see if Schalke decides to get rid of something like the Azir, which is a very powerful mid lane pick as well.
This does suggest to me that SK is trying to push Schalke into something like an Aatrox. We know that Odoamne is very comfortable on the champion, and with Maokai taken off the board, with Renekton taken off the board, you have to go, okay, is Wukong something you want to blind pick? Well, it's risky, because then Odo's going to get himself the Mordekaiser, and he's going to be feeling very happy. So maybe they're saying, hey, you know what, we want you to blind pick that Aatrox, then we're going to pick Wukong into it, because we know with the recent reworks to Wukong, he's pretty good into that matchup, and it's an easy lane that we can look to play around for Jenax.
And we'll see if SK decide that is the route they want to take, because of course they could pick their top laner here and then blind pick, have their counter pick for mid lane last. It actually looks like SK are going to give Jenax probably his signature pick in the Aatrox. Of course, he was known mostly for it in the mid lane, but he's going to take it up towards the top lane this game, we expect.
Well, now the reverse is the case. With Wukong up, does Odoamne choose to go for it himself? I think the matchup can be pretty favorable for the Wukong, and I think that it's an easy lane that you can look to play around, especially at early levels, especially once you hit that level 6 mark. The hover is coming through, the lock-in is now going to come through for Schalke, and now we're only looking at mid lanes, with some of the big priorities gone in Syndra, Azir, LeBlanc. Zoe becomes the next one that you look at as being a potential safe pick for Schalke, and it would synergize quite well with the poke that they already have from the Ezreal.
I also think Orianna could be really good with this composition. It gives you that little bit more engaged potential, or at least wombo combo potential, because you have the Wukong going in, then the Orianna ball comes out, and instead of just having only the Wukong there to CC people up, you have the Orianna alongside it.
Orianna's also a pretty good matchup into the Zoe during early levels. It gets a little bit harder as the game progresses because of the bit range difference between them. But as you rightly says, Orianna, typically very lane dominant, also offers a lot in terms of team fight, can be counterpicked though. So SK have a lot of options. They're going for the Galio. Not a common counter pick, I would say. Melee champions usually struggle a lot against Orianna, but of course, Galio naturally has a lot of MR. He has that magic resistant shield as well, and he's pretty good at mitigating a lot of MR matchups. And you've got to remember that Galio has received a number of small buffs between when we last played in spring on 10.6 and what we're currently on 10.11. So he is a little bit stronger than what he used to be, and he offers a lot of team fight tools himself. When we look at these comps across the board, SK's is very focused on enabling Crownshot, making sure that he can have the space, have the front line to just dish out this damage, where Schalke has way more disruption. There's a lot of mobility on their composition. They can be dashing, they can be sliding. They have quite a lot of threat onto the backline. The big question is how easily can they get onto that backline? Can they effectively kill this Aphelios when there is so much sitting in front and protecting them?
Well, we're about to find out, Vedius. It's game 1 of day 2. SK are going to take on Schalke. And on to Summoner's Rift we go. You did mention some of the changes to Galio. One that I think could have a big impact here is the magic damage shield he gives everyone in the AoE of his ultimate when we get towards those fights later on. If someone's caught out and then Galio ults them to try and save them from the shockwave, you can mitigate quite a lot of damage, and we'll see if that interaction does come to pass. But for now, we've got a long time before the level 6s, Vedius. Where are your eyes drawn to? What do your Vedius eyes see?
Well, when we look at the early game, the thing that you've always got to think about is how lucky is the Kindred, right? Because it's funny, because whenever I talk to Ender, and whenever he's telling me about Kindred, it's like, you either have good luck or bad luck, because obviously you've got to pick which side of the map that you start, but the Scuttle Crab will decide which will give you a mark very early on. And if you're pathing towards bot side and then the mark suddenly spawns top, you're like, well, this is unfortunate. So we'll see where the Kindred looks to start. Right now, it's looking like a top side start. Will Lurox have that fortune bless him? Will he path towards the bot side, or will he do a full clear towards the top side and hopefully stick around and wait for that mark to appear?
Well, she's currently starting on the top side, as you said. It's going to be Trick starting by himself on the blue buff towards the bottom side for SK. Allows Crownshot and Limit to get into the lane just that little bit earlier. And I do want to highlight just how strong Limit was yesterday on the Thresh. His positioning in teamfights was really powerful. His selection of targets for the hooks works out really well, and although he doesn't have the save potential of a Lantern on the Nautilus, he does still have the ability to make some good engage for his team.
And for the Karma, as you were talking about, because Limit doesn't have that same setup that he had with the Thresh, he will have a lot of pushing power with Innaxe in this 2 versus 2. Ezreal and Karma, very oppressive when it comes to poke. And while I think Aphelios can be quite strong depending on his support matchup, unfortunately for Nautilus, until you get those levels under your belt, you can't really look to start going for those trades in the early laning phase. So SK going to play on the back foot, going to play a little bit more defensively, and we can see now Kindred doing that path from blue into Gromp into red, now looking to move into the river, utilize some of the early priority that Innaxe has built for himself. We'll get a bit of vision down, and now we're kind of, if you're Lurox, you're hoping for a bit of luck. Meanwhile, on the top side, Trick is looking for a gank.
Odoamne's been locked up with the Darking Blade. He's going to try and get his way away, but it's still only level 2. Stands still for a second, but he is first blood here for SK.
Really good gank here from SK. Very straightforward, very simple, and a very early back is going to come out from Jenax as well. And I think this is very important when playing into a Wukong, because having spoken to a couple of pros, they tell me that Wukong spikes very hard when he completes his core atomization, but struggles a little bit when he is in his components. So putting him behind, delaying him from reaching those spikes is very, very important, especially with how strong his early dueling actually is.
And you can see Lurox has lost the luck battle. The mark is sitting up on that top side Scuttle Crab. Of course, you need 4 marks to get that extra bonus attack range on your abilities and on your auto attacks on the Kindred. So now he's fallen behind early on.
He may still get lucky though, because when we look at the mid lane setup, you can see that Abbedagge does have push right now, as you would expect in this 1v1 where Orianna very lane dominant into many of her matchups. And the Wukong, the reason why Odoamne got ganked was because he was exerting a bit of early pressure. The wave was not in a great position for him. Of course, Lurox was on the bot side of the map, and his ward that Lurox had was just sitting in the river, so he didn't see him coming out from try, allowing SK to find that early kill. But because that wave was stacking up, Odoamne has pushed top, they have pushed mid, which means the Lurox is actually pretty safe going for the Scuttle Crab, meaning he will get this double Scuttle, and overall a great early game for the Kindred.
Actually really strong for the Kindred, getting both the Scuttle Crabs and his first mark. We'll see how quickly he can get towards that 4 mark point. Across the board, things relatively even. You can see a slight CS lead for Odoamne in the top lane, but of course he has died, so you have to mitigate that with the assist gold that Jenax will have got. Bot lane, slight CS lead for Crownshot, but there's a wave pushing in, I believe, towards Innaxe, so he should be able to farm that back up himself. And overall, pretty even, although SK do have a 500 gold lead.
So one of the things we have to think about with the Galio is when can he look to roam?
Yeah.
Medic, when we were playing in the MSS, you remember how that Galio came bot a lot.
I do.
Right? And you typically want to do that when you have a wave stacking up. Now you'll notice that with Crownshot and Limit, they actually have a wave just about to hit the tower. But ZaZee, not that level 6 yet, can't look to set up that dive play right now. You can see the Trundle hovering around, wants to make sure that in the event that Lurox shows up, that his bot lane will be safe, but because he's not, he's utilizing this pressure to take the early Drake. So good utilization of where the waves are in terms of the mid lane and the bot lane, the fact that the Orianna reset as well to allow Trick to take this early Drake. They can now look for about 7.5 minutes when the wave reset again to go for that potential dive towards the bot side of the map. And Trick, please don't. Okay.
Look. He's had some failings in the past, but I'm pretty sure he knows how to use the smite. He will get the Cloud Drake at the 5.5 minute mark here for SK. And I want to just come back to that point as, you know, people are just resetting on the map. Can you use that same timing window for a top lane dive, for example? Can you get the waves pushing into top at 7.5 minutes, go for the dive, and then look for a Rift Herald? So
top lane is a little bit more complicated because depending on the matchup, it varies depending on the jungle pathing, because around 6.5 minutes is when the starting camps respawn. So if SK were to try and do that on the opposite side of the map, you'd have to bear in mind that Kindred is already pathing that way anyway because her blue will be coming up soon, and so it's a lot more dangerous. And so there are various other things you have to factor in. What many teams will do sometimes is obviously look for the swap as well, because that dive is very real at about that 7:30 mark. Some teams just look to avoid it, especially if they've already gotten an early Drake, because they then want to rotate up and then look for an early Herald play. Of course, because the early Herald hasn't spawned yet, for now, Crownshot and Limit are just going to stay in this 2 versus 2 with the BF sword already completed. Crownshot will also feel a lot more confident. But you can see how this wave is slowly starting to stack up. And it's something you have to keep your eyes on, with ZaZee now hitting that level 6, with the blue buff on the bot side for Trundle now spawning. Trick is going to make his way down. And we have our eyes on this bot side.
Hook lands onto Innaxe. He's just going to arcane shift his way away, but you can actually see Lurox is making his way down here as well. It's actually abandoned his blue on that top side and said, well, perhaps a dive is going to happen. I'm going to make sure I'm down here to protect my teammates. He did manage to sneak in, steal away Raptors, so he now has his second mark as well. And he is slowly scaling up towards that fourth spike.
So you can see these things starting to come to fruition, Medic. SK have a clear plan of what they want to do, but Lurox, he's taking a bit of self-sacrifice here. He's saying, okay, I want to be in position to make the counter happen. Here's the wave, and look at what Abbedagge is doing in the mid lane as well. Following ZaZee around, saying, no, 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 you're not allowed to leave. I'm going to bully you every time you try, and I'm going to push this wave as fast as possible. So if you do roam, you're going to lose a lot of farm. So the 7:30 window has passed. SK did not find the dive. Lurox has still hit level 6, a little bit ahead of Trick as well. So Schalke are feeling pretty happy. They've avoided what could have been a very devastating play.
And it's actually quite reminiscent to yesterday when SK looked for I believe it was a 4:30 dive against Origin, and they just forced them off the tower. They didn't actually get any kills, but they did manage to get a plate. That's what's happened here again. Perhaps they would have wanted a little bit more out of that, but getting a plate for your AD carry, getting a slight CS lead is always good when we rely on AD carries later on in the game.
So now we're looking at, do SK consider a swap up towards the top side of the map? Because Herald is, of course, an option. Lurox, knowing that his top side camps are all available, he naturally wants to path that way anyway. He's going to be able to very early secure that Scuttlecrab. I believe he also got himself another mark there as well.
Yep.
And so Schalke are setting up for control around that area of the map with the amount of pressure that Odoamne is exerting in the top 1 versus 1. He's also generating pressure, and Abbedagge can look to do the same as well. So Rift Herald is the next play that we're looking at for both these teams.
There's always that dragon coming up in 2 minutes time as well, so it's possible we see a trade going on. Odoamne is losing out to Jenax here, who has got himself Ninja Tabi early to make sure that that clone and Wukong himself isn't putting too much damage down. And it's actually going to be SK who start this up. Trick is ticked away on health just a little bit, but because Odoamne is forced underneath his tower, it will be a 3v2 for the moment because Odo cannot come down to join. You can see Schalke decide they don't want any more of that action. They will back away, and Trick will smite the Rift Herald.
I'm really happy with the early game that we're seeing from SK right now. It feels like that they've come in with a very clear plan. They're utilizing their pressure well. They're setting up their minion waves well. And what was great here is A typical play that we would often see is rotate bot to top, use the pressure by swapping first in order to get that prio in the top wave to then rotate into river and secure the herald. Instead, what SK did was, we have a pushing wave anyway. That bounce is going to come back in favor of Jenax, so we'll just utilize that. He is a little bit stronger right now by going for the very early Ninja Tabi, which does mitigate a lot of Wukong's early power. And on top of that, because Orianna's just reset, we can push in mid-wave. And by doing this, by forcing the Rift Herald play, we also free up Crownshot and Limit to be very aggressive in the 2 versus 2. They were able to secure another plate, and they've been able to extend the CS lead as well. So SK, across the board, are getting very small advantages, and now they're sitting at a 1k gold lead as a result of that. So compared to last split, I think we're seeing a pretty significant difference in the concept of macro when it comes to what SK are demonstrating in this early game.
It's definitely great to see. Of course, we want all the teams in the LECs to be playing at their best. Schalke here have yet to find their stride in this game, you have to say. They are only 1,000 gold behind, but I want to just see that a little bit more from them. Perhaps the Mountain Dragon is the next target for them.
Well, you've got to remember that from the lens of Schalke, things that they would have liked to have done early on is try and get the Wukong ahead, right? Okay, so they weren't able to make that happen, but they still scale very well. Their teamfight composition is still very well with the Kindred, with the Orianna, with the Wukong. Their ability to find that wombo combo is very real. The question is, how much are they going to lose in the early games? SK are committing to this tower.
Trick is already chunked out by Lurox, and here comes the Rift Herald charging in. Will get a few plays, but can't quite get the turret. It felt like SK were making a play for the tower and dragon, but Lurox was there in time, and Abbedagge had already started moving down from mid lane. Pushed it out once again, was going to be there with his team quicker than ZaZee could react.
Yeah, it feels like Schalke can see what SK is trying to do. Of course, they do keep the tower alive, but still lose a lot of plates, more gold going into the back pockets of SK. It looks like SK want to start moving Crownshot around the map, keep funneling those gold and resources into the AD carry, their primary damage resource, and Schalke are now responding by moving resources into the mid lane.
Trick gonna get forced out once again. You can see Schalke just trying to play around this vision, gain some control of the area. And they will have it for the moment. I believe Lurox is still sitting at 3 stacks. His other one was on the Gromp, has now moved over to the Razorbeak. So it's on the opposite side of the map of where he is right now. Would love to get that if he could.
So, hang on, I just want to have a look here. We see a number of people rotating around the mid lane. Even the Aatrox has roamed down from the top side. If our observers would be so kind of swap over to the gold, I just want to highlight the differences between the AD carries right now. 5,100 for Crownshot, 3,800 for Innaxe. The clear focus for SK is funnel gold into Crownshot. And so far in this early game, they've done a fantastic job. He has about a 20 CS lead. He's completed his Infinity Edge. And now they're moving up to the top side of the map where there's another 4 plates for the taking. Medic. He's first on the rotate, and while Schalke will be able to answer, and the plates are going to be falling off relatively soon, if they can just get that little bit extra gold into his back pocket, the sooner he's going to come online, and the sooner SK can start to look for fights themselves. And remember, when it comes to these team fights, it's going to be a stark contrast where SK is all about as many meat shields around the man with multiple guns as possible, versus Schalke, who's like, okay, we want to use our poke, our mobility, the fact that we can disrupt a lot of these team fights because we have the Wukong ultimate, we have the... Oh, we see an engage.
We have the Innaxe about to fall him in the top lane. The Infernum gun is ticking him away, and the last auto attack will be enough. Innaxe stepped a little bit too greedily up in the lane there, and Crownshot was able to hit him with the Gravitum.
This SK bot lane is continuing to show up. We saw a great performance from them yesterday. We're seeing it again. We thought that they might only be able to get 1 extra plate, but with 30 seconds left until the plates fall, they're going to keep getting called into that back pocket, and Crownshot is continuing to extend his lead.
Had a very good couple of games. Last split, he was definitely the star for SK, in my opinion. Here, he is showing exactly why they are willing to put so many eggs in his basket, but now Jenax is going to be in a 1v3, 1v4 soon. The Shockwave, Abbedagge put it on himself, and here comes the Galio. ZaZee trying to turn this one around. The taunt comes out, and Lurox is down. Didn't even use the Lamb Stress Bite in time, and now Abbedagge has been exhausted, and ZaZee's just going to chase him away, but Nukes does have the chain. Will slow up ZaZee for the moment, puts on the Shield of Durand, looking for anyone to taunt, but will be able to escape with just the Justice Punch.
Beautifully played from SK once again. Jenax was sticking around for what should have been much longer than he's supposed to. You're looking at the map state, you can see SK have invested multiple people to the top side, and you're like, okay, Jenax, you've got to play weak side right now. You've got to respect a potential dive. But, of course, the Galio ultimate is ready, and ZaZee sees it, too. He's already positioned. And when we look at the replay, notice the positioning of ZaZee as the play is happening. You look at your minimap right now. He's waiting. He's ready. He's like, the dive is coming. Everyone knows the dive is coming. And immediately, it comes through as the dive is coming through. So, Jenax is then able to buy enough time. You can see Lurox and Abbedagge are forced off to the side. Odoamne takes way too much damage, and Lurox doesn't even get a chance to use his ultimate, which means that Schalke are then forced to disengage. ZaZee then just acts as a meat shield to keep Jenax safely away. And what should have been Schalke trying to answer on the map, they get that dive, they get that tower, they even up the gold a little bit, ends up in disaster, and now SK's 4k gold ahead.
SK in such a strong position, just continuing to win out on these trades. Did see Abbedagge totally whiff his shockwave in that fight as well. I'm not sure how much of a difference it would have made, but you have to be positioning those ultimates correctly when you go for a fight like this. Now, Lurox is looking to try and steal away this Gromp. I do not believe it is marked. The mark is sitting over on the Razor Beaks, but Lurox is still at 15 minutes, only at 3 marks, just being held short of that breakpoint on the Kindred. Has finished his warrior and is building up towards what I assume will be a black cleaver next. However, the big person you always have to talk about is that Aphelios. Infinity Edge complete, Zeal complete. He currently has 2,600 more gold than Innaxe.
Mate, he's got 2,000 more gold than ZaZee, who's the second highest amount of gold in the game right now.
4 of the 5 SK players. Oh, not anymore. Okay. Odoamne, you ruined it. Stop seeing it. 4 of the. Oh no. 4 of the 5 SK players are in the top 5, Vedius.
It's true. SK are dominating right now, and they've just secured the Rift Tower. They're going to move this round to the mid lane as well. Like, I'm a little flabbergasted, Medic.
So, I'm just going to whisper it. Perfect game.
I mean, maybe. We'll have to see. Like, there's still a lot of the game left, but I am nothing but impressed with how SK have played this early game so far. Great utilization of early pressure, great objective focus. They haven't taken any unnecessary fights. They haven't gambled anything. And while I think Schalke have managed to stall and dissuade some of the plays that SK tried to make, the plays that they did try to execute ended up falling apart. Odoamne died early on. They couldn't make that successful dive happen in the bot side. They couldn't really trade elsewhere on the map, and right now, SK have all of their towers left up alive. SK are going to focus their resources onto trying to secure that mid-tier 1, open up the map, and with the Infernal Drake spawning very, very soon, that's clearly going to be their next objective, and you can already see they're on their way down. Orianna's top lane, she doesn't have teleport. It looks like Schalke is saying, you know what, we'll trade top tower for Drake, but now they have to start contesting them because 17 minutes into the game, SK already are going to have 3 Drakes. So you're looking at that Infernal Soul at about, what, 23, 24 minutes into the game.
It's going to be so strong for SK. The objective control from Trick in the last couple of days has been exemplary, and I want to just impress upon people the importance of having these early wins in a split, because if you can get 3 or 4 games under your belt, 3 or 4 wins under your belt in the first 2 weeks, the first 5 games, you're about halfway on your way to playoffs. You only need to pick up about 8 wins, maybe 9 wins usually, to make it into our playoffs, and then you have a single best of 5 between you and a chance at Worlds, right? If SK can push like this and continue to pick up a few wins, they are very much in contention for playoffs.
And when you look at a split in its entirety, teams get better as you go on, typically, right? And so securing early wins is very important. And in an ideal world, what you want to secure those early wins against, like a G2 or a Fnatic,
an Origin.
If you can get those wins early, yeah, exactly, then you're really setting yourself up for success when those teams are still trying to figure out what they want to do and how they really want to approach the game. But also, if you can secure teams around you that you expect to be competing with when you come to those playoff spots, that's even more valuable. Because, okay, if SK lost to Origin, is that really the end of the world? No. But what does matter is trying to beat people who are competing for the same spots as you. But the way in which SK is going about it right now, they're looking very strong.
Very clean from them so far. Have 2 items on their AD carry now. Jenax in a side lane, perhaps going to be dived once again, puts down that control ward and will dissuade Schalke from doing anything for the moment. Trinity Force has been completed on Odoamne, so he is pretty strong now on this Wukong, but right now all of the cards are in SK's hands and they're just deciding how they want to deal with them.
I mean, SK are taking everything right now, and notice how, again, Schalke were trying to trade that bot tower, but they couldn't. because SK were in a better position with where their waves were set up. They had the vision control around the top side. They threatened the tier 2. So Schalke's like, okay, we'll reset, we'll come back. And then SK's like, perfect, we'll just take all your jungle now.
Yep.
So now Kindred is falling a little bit further behind. You also take away the blue buff from the Orianna. And you can see some of these big itemizations being completed now. Death's Dance already done for the Aatrox. This is going to make him so much harder to kill. You've got the Zhonya's finished for Galio. Another one who's going to be difficult to kill. And remember, when we talked about these compositions, SK, front line, it's all about keeping Aphelios safe. The guy that has 2 items already completed. Looks like he's going for a Death's Dance third as well. SK are just, I mean, as you mentioned it, they're setting themselves up for the perfect game.
Let's see if they can keep it going. Next dragon in 3 minutes. There's a Baron on the cards now as well, as that has just spawned. Oda was able to win out the battle of the red buff, which is very important to retain your honor as a top laner, obviously. He's now going to push out this bottom wave, but once again, is SK just positioning on the top side and Schalke trying to find an answer.
Now, it is important to acknowledge that with Luden's Echo being done, with the Mana Mune being upgraded to the more mana, Schalke have hit a couple of items by themselves, the Trinity Force as well for the Wukong. So that wombo combo, the ability for them to dive onto the Aphelios, try and burst him down in an instant, is very realistic, or at the very least, the team fighting tools that they need are at their core complete, and I imagine the Ligandries is going to be finished very soon for Abbedagge. So this is where SK have to be cautious about the fights that they approach, because if they're careless, they could just end up throwing away that big lead that they built.
They definitely could, and I actually really like what Crownshot, what I think Crownshot is about to do with his itemization, which is Death's Dance third, right? Because you know you are the key carry for the team, and yes, you have some meat shields, but you're already far enough ahead that you can justify itemizing a little bit more tankiness, a little bit more survivability, and being able to survive through a possible burst wombo combo coming out from Schalke.
Yeah, I mean, with the magic shield that you're going to get from the Galio ultimate, on top of the resistances that you'll get with the Death Dance, on top of the lifesteal, the shield that you'll also have.
The damage over time reduction.
Yeah, I feel like Aphelios in this position, a little broken, you know, he's just a little strong. I think there's a reason why he's currently S tier in the perspective of the pros, and my only concern is that when you go for a build like this with Ezreal, I think this type of build is really good for kiting and keeping Ezreal self-sufficient. Yeah. But I don't think it's the strongest at melting through front lines or tanks, and if you delay your Blade of the Ruin King, which I think is something very effective at killing those frontline tanks, it's only going to make it harder. And typically with Ezreal's, we see the Death's Dance come in third after this type of itemization. Yeah. So I'm a little bit concerned about that, but we'll have to see where the rest of this game progresses as the Infernal Drake spawns in 45 seconds, Medic. That is where we're guaranteed a fight, because if Schalke don't fight it, they're going to give over the Infernal Soul, and at that point, the game becomes very difficult.
I think the game's already quite difficult, but yes, the game will become even more difficult than it has been so far. Okay, Schalke are going to try and push in here and get some vision if they can, but Trick already in the river has put down a control ward of his own. Jenax is coming up from the bottom lane.
Look at the wave states from SK. Top is pushed in, bot is pushed in right now. They're contesting mid lane priority. Schalke have to commit multiple members to try and assure this, but they can't get it, and now SK are going to make their way into the river.
Crownshot has the Calibrum and the Infernum. Pretty good for wave clear, pretty good for some long-range shots as well here. We'll be looking to see if he can catch out Innaxe, just get a bit of chunk damage down, because there we go. Innaxe is going to get reduced just a tad. I was a bit more excited about that than the damage really made me be, but now Jenax is going to try and get a flank off. Don't know if he knows there's a ward there. I believe he doesn't, because he's just stepping around the corner. Infernal Dragon has been started up here by SK. Schalke trying to fight it. They know they have to do something pretty soon, because otherwise they're going to lose out on the Infernal Soul. And now SK get it down to about 5,000 HP. Schalke still posturing, setting up. Shield of Duran's not quite going to hit, but Innaxe is already down to half HP, and the Infernal Dragon is ticking away. It's going to get smited, and now the Infernal Soul sits there. Crownshot flashes away from the shockwave. Now he's just jumping straight in. Has the crescendo, has the Infernum. He's going to melt through. Schalke, the Lamb's Respite will not save you for long. And this is what Aphelios can do. 200 years worth of damage coming out here from Aphelios. A double for Jenax. Crownshot looking for the final kill as Innaxe tries to get his way away, but he walks straight back into the flames. 7-1 SK.
Beautifully played from SK. They're looking for the ace. Jenax is on the hunt. There's no flash available on Abbedagge, but with the kite ability and the phase rush on Abbedagge, he will be able to disengage from this one. SK, they don't have their jungler alive, but I don't think it matters. With Crownshot up and ready to dish the damage, Baron is on the cards for SK Gaming.
And it is a shame to see Trick fall, denying SK the perfect game, but they won't care too much about it because they have had some perfect team fights They have set up their vision incredibly well. They've set up the way they wanted to play this game incredibly well, and they just look like a team transformed from Spring.
So let's have a look at how this one plays out. The positioning of Crownshot is extremely important. And notice how Abbedagge tries to get the ball onto Crownshot. And Crownshot's thinking to himself, I've got to dodge this. Flashes it straight into the face of Abbedagge and says, you want to go toe-to-toe? Let's go. Dishes out the damage. Yes, the Lamb's Respite comes out to buy a little bit more time, but then the Galio shield comes through to help keep Crownshot alive as well. And I think the way he executed that fight was extremely well. The rest of the team just trying to create as much disruption as possible. Jenax on the right-hand side saying, no, Wukong, no flank for you. And even though he does get the knockup, it's too little, too late. Schalke cannot find the setup that they were looking for. SK walk away with the Infernal Soul, with the Baron buff, and they're on track to secure this game as well.
They are. They're in such a strong position. Going to push in bot right now. A 7,700 gold lead for SK. They're looking to go undefeated through the first couple of days here in the LEC. It would take something truly special from Schalke to be able to get back on into this one. They do, of course, have some scaling components, but I don't think they're going to be let to continue at this game much longer. Trick trading on Odoamne. We'll just walk away from this. And the waves are not in the best of positions for SK. Bot is crashing, mid is on its way, top is almost at the turret, but really you want these waves pushing in unison.
Yeah, but look, they're delaying clearing the minion waves out to wait for mid to hit at the same time, and you'll see both waves now approaching the towers at exactly the same time. Schalke invest their players towards bot, which means that SK can secure a tower mid. Now, of course, the bot wave has been cleared out, so SK have to wait a little bit longer. And because they don't have teleport, it's a little risky sending people top. But again, here, notice, they're not killing the minions. I'm so impressed with what SK have been doing this game. They're waiting for the minions to stack up so that these towers, or these minions, can crash at the same time. They can see top tower wave is going to hit the tower now. They're going to look to secure that one. This is some good League of Legends that we're seeing from SK right now.
You have to remember they brought in a new head coach over the offseason. It's Jezaze from LDLC, who is now head coach of the team. And LDLC won EU Masters, so he's obviously doing something right. Of course, it relies on the team executing the strategy, and that's exactly what they're doing right now. Single cannon minion going to push in here in the bottom lane. The Graviton's going to lock up Nukes just for the moment, and SK just trying to chip away at this turret where they can, but of course, Aphelios doesn't have the longest range unless he has the cleave room, and they see that the top tower falls. They say, okay, we can disengage. We don't need to break the base right now. We have an Elder Dragon in 2.5 minutes if we want to fight for that, or Baron in just over 3.
Yeah, their minion waves are a little bit awkward right now. I think the Baron buff has either just run out or is about to just run out, and they're like, okay, it's fine. We've gotten a number of towers. We got bot, mid, and top tier 2. We've extended our gold lead to 10k now. They're feeling pretty comfortable. They don't need to bite off more than they can chew. They can take their time, and they can wait, as you rightly said, for the next Elder. But, like, let's just take a second to appreciate how well SK are playing this game right now, because especially coming into the early weeks, when we look at a lot of teams, macro is usually the bit that we criticize the most because it's messy. Teams don't often have that synergy that they will get later on into the split. But obviously, while we do have a long off season with no MSI, you have to wonder what the practice was like for these teams, the changes that they made, how valuable, how much did it elevate SK? And clearly it's elevated them a lot. The introduction of ZaZee, clearly being a primary team player, Jenax showcasing that he can still be a big carry up towards the top side, and I think that he has had a stellar Aatrox game. You mentioned, it's not that he's unfamiliar with the champion, we just know him for it in the mid lane rather than the top lane. And then Crownshot on Limit, just playing very well in the 2 versus 2, even finding a 2 versus 2 kill against Innaxe and Nukes. And sure, it is against Schalke. So far, they've had not the most impressive start to the split, but with a core basis of this to then build upon, I think that is an excellent foundation for SK to then build upon throughout the rest of summer, and then bring into the equation of how much of a contender are they for playoffs. Of course, it's still week 1.
Yeah.
Still week 1.
But we have 3 games in week 1. That's a sixth of the split, Vedius.
But again, considering the amount of criticism that we gave towards SK last split, the fact that they clearly had no identity, as I said at the beginning of this game, they were kind of like headless chickens last split. It felt like that everyone wanted to do different things. The amount of teamwork that we're seeing from them, the cohesion, the execution, I think is very impressive. Now the Elder Dragon will be spawning in 30 seconds. This is obviously going to be the next primary objective. They need to push out that bot wave. They don't really care too much about the top tower for now, even though Jenax does have teleport. They're going to get rid of the blast cone too, but Schalke are like, no, no. We can't lose this because then the game is definitely over. So this is their last hurrah.
Moonlight Vigil's going to come out from Crownshot. The hook goes in, but only onto Odoamne. Jenax has a good flank position off here. Crownshot not ready with the team yet, but he's going to come in. The shockwave comes out though, and Crownshot has been locked up within in the moment. The Lamb Surge Spike isn't going to save Innaxe, isn't going to save Nukes, and here comes the hero's entrance. Nukes getting chased off towards the bottom side. He's already gone. Odoamne chased out by a Crownshot, and he should be able to pick up that kill as well. Innaxe v Jenax. I know who wins this one. Usually the Aatrox, who's 2-0-6. Goodbye Innaxe, goodbye Schalke, and goodbye Schalke's Nexus as well, because SK are going to take the win. 11 kills to 1, 12,000 gold ahead, with a demonstration of macro I did not expect to see from SK. They are going to go 2-0 in their first 2 games here in the LEC and make a stake on their way to playoffs.
I mean, a nearly perfect game from SK. Their only death being Trick in what was a very one-sided team fight. Like, you know, I'd be willing to just say, like, that was pretty much a perfect game. So, props to them. As you rightly said, this isn't what I expected from SK. And again, you have to put it in the context of how strong is Schalke. Perhaps not the strongest team, but again, when you look at the foundation that you're building upon, having that kind of a performance against a team like Schalke sets you up to what are they going to look like against a rogue, a misfit. It now makes those interesting matchups a lot more competitive. And now your expectations for SK are suddenly on the up and up.
Oh, they definitely are. I'm really excited for SK from now on in the split. We'll see how they do tomorrow and see how they do the rest of the week, but rest of the split. But I'm very interested in following this team's growth. You can vote for your key player of the game, all from SK at LEC on Twitter. Jenax, Trick, and Crownshot are your options. 3 very good choices, in my opinion. I would always chuck Limit in there just because, you know, supports, you know, we stick together. It's kind of the thing that we do. But SK are looking like a completely different team. And after the break, Jenax is going to tell us more about their